I've been walking these streets in Tirana, wondering, where did all this come from? Who funded this transformation? And that simple question pulled a thread, not just of Albanian history, but of American power. Because for every street paved, another was bombed. For every nation lifted, another was sanctioned. So today we're asking, who has America helped and who has it hurt? Hey guys, Scott Layton here. Welcome to another episode of My Expat Life here on the Renaissance Spirit channel. We'll be taking another walking tour today of Tirana. And as you may remember from some of my earlier videos and the podcast, I mentioned that even though Tirana has ancient roots going at least as far back as the 3rd century CE, as I've tried to show in the Roman mosaic videos of Tirana, too bad that it never seems to be open, the modern city itself was created under the Ottomans in 1614. Much of what you see today wasn't built until Tirana became Albania's capital in 1920. And even more expansion happened after the fall of communism in 1990. It all got me thinking, when were these beautiful tree-lined streets created? And more pointedly, where did the money come from? I'll do a full video on the history of Tirana in a future episode. It's a weird and fascinating story with ties to Mussolini and more. You won't want to miss it. But that one question got my mind swirling. And to a modern polymath like me, one question raises another. And it got me thinking about America again. I'll explain why in a moment. I'm filming in the early days of 2026, when once again the world feels upside down. The news is often distressing, disturbing, and, let's face it, crazy. And much of that, at least at the moment, is because of one man in Washington, sipping Diet Cokes and wondering what he can take over next. I'm here in Albania, a place many of you may not think about when discussing global power. But this small nation, like so many others, has felt the ripple effects of America's global influence, for better and worse. This video isn't about politics or slogans, it's about impact, real consequences on real lives. Today, Americans and people around the world are asking a fundamental question. Is America a friend or a foe? Especially under Donald Trump's leadership. So, as we walk past these beautiful tree-lined streets in the center of Tirana, let's take an objective record. Not just about money or policy or culture, but about the lived effects Americans, Cubans, Iraqis, Ukrainians, Albanians, Greenlanders, and many others have faced because of actions taken in Washington. Why now? Because with global news so chaotic, wars, sanctions, geopolitical stress, it's easy to be overwhelmed. But these aren't abstract headlines. These are real policies with real impacts, from Cuba's economic collapse to questions about Ukraine's future, from Greenland's pushback against U.S. pressure to debates about whether America helps or hinders the world. This isn't about opinion. It's about evidence. It's time to document the American record. Let's start with cases widely seen as helpful. After World War II, the Marshall Plan helped rebuild Western Europe's economies and institutions. This recovery helped shape democratic prosperity. U.S. support helped rebuild Japan into a democratic economic power. In Korea, U.S. military support helped prevent total takeover by the North. U.S. funding has gone into vaccines, HIV and AIDS programs, disaster relief, and more, globally saving millions of lives. In the Balkans, especially in Kosovo, U.S. and NATO action helped stop ethnic cleansing. These are not fringe opinions. They are major, well-documented impacts that helped millions. But alongside those positive impacts are cases where U.S. involvement had profound, long-lasting harm. Iraq, 2003, invasion. Overthrow of Saddam Hussein led to years of instability, violence, and human suffering. Afghanistan, 2001 to 2021, 2 decades of war with deep human cost. Let's talk about regime change and covert actions. Guatemala, Iran, 1953, Chile, 1973, Nicaragua, the U.S.-supported coups and covert intervention that destabilized societies and weakened democracies. Cuba faced a 68-year embargo that crippled its economy, reinvigorated authoritarian rigidity, and contributed to mass emigration. Similar long-term sanctions have been imposed on Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, impacting ordinary lives more than political elites. These are not theoretical debates. They are real, documented repercussions with demographic, economic, and social impacts. Major point from The Guardian. After 68 years of sanctions and a 64-year economic embargo, Cuba's economy is in deep crisis, with 1 in 4 Cubans over 60 and a dramatic population decline from emigration. Now let's be clear, Cuba's government over decades has also made policy choices that failed its people. But this video asks a different question. Would Cuban people be disillusioned with the revolution if it weren't for the embargo? Two forces combined here. The embargo severely limited trade, investment, and access to financing, compounding existing structural economic problems. At the same time, the Cuban state's choices around industry, foreign investment, and political repression also contributed to stagnation. Many young Cubans now see no future at home, and that's not just because of ideology, it's because of material conditions. What's notable is that much of that hardship is exacerbated by external economic pressure. Then there's Ukraine, where U.S. aid has helped the country defend itself against invasion. That's arguably one of the most significant instances in recent history where American involvement has supported a nation's sovereignty. But the war's human toll is massive, illustrating how great power conflict impacts everyday people. Let's move to Latin America. The U.S. military operation in Venezuela to capture Maduro and take control of oil exports sparked international controversy and raised concerns about sovereignty and legality. U.S. sanctions have affected oil traffic around Venezuela, with tankers trying to evade blockades, showing how economic pressure impacts global trade and livelihoods. And now, a story many people are watching this year, Greenland. President Trump has publicly stated that the U.S. might seek to acquire Greenland, even implying force if necessary, citing national security and geopolitical competition with Russia and China. But Greenlandic leaders strongly reject becoming part of the United States, insisting their future should be decided by Greenlanders themselves. And many polls show most Greenlanders don't want to be Americans. This is a vivid contemporary example of how U.S. rhetoric and geopolitical competition can be perceived as threat rather than friendship, especially when people feel their self-determination is at stake. Now let's talk about why this history is especially relevant today. Under Trump's leadership, many traditional pillars of U.S. foreign involvement have shifted or been reversed. The U.S. has pulled back from international cooperation in climate, health, and multilateral institutions, weakening long-standing global partnerships. Europe, NATO, trade, and alliances have become more transactional, creating uncertainty among traditional partners. A more expansionist approach to the Americas has been noted, echoing an updated Monroe Doctrine-style policy that prioritizes U.S. dominance. This means that nations that once saw the U.S. as a guarantor of stability are now questioning whether it's a reliable friend or a self-interested competitor. Let's move to Saudi Arabia and the Gulf partners. U.S. alliances here have supported stability for oil markets, but also have geopolitical and human rights costs, e.g. Yemen. And Iran, withdrawal from the nuclear deal and escalating sanctions increased regional tension. In Asia, U.S. alliances helped post-war recovery but now compete amid China's rise. And in Mexico, trade agreements boosted economies but also created migration pressures. So what's the record? It's mixed. America has helped rebuild nations, supported public health, and defended sovereignty. But it has also supported repressive regimes, waged wars that destroyed societies, imposed sanctions that hurt civilians, and threatened self-determination. And today, under Trump, long-standing allies are questioning U.S. commitment. Small nations like Greenland are pushing back. And millions around the world, from Cuba to Ukraine, are living the consequences of these policies. I left the U.S. not because I stopped caring, but because I couldn't keep pretending the story was simple. Because once you've seen both the aid convoy and the crater, both the clinic and the coup, you stop asking whether a nation is good or bad. You ask, who paid the price? This is why it matters, not because of politics, not because of ideology, but because impact, effects, people's lives, that's the true record. And it's time we looked at it with clarity and honesty. If you've seen the impact of U.S. policy, whether good or bad, I want to hear it. Not just as politics, but as real life. Because this isn't about headlines, it's about people. Let's talk about it in the comments below.